Wait outside. The words still stung hours later. Rain plastered her hair to her scalp. Amara shivered, but not from the cold. They thought they were teaching her a lesson, these gatekeepers. Another uppity black woman put in her place. Fools. They had no idea she was recording every second, documenting their smug faces through the glass. 47 minutes. 47 minutes to let the rage simmer, to let a plan take shape. Morrison thought he was humiliating a pilot. He was actually arming a revolution. This wasn't just about a missed flight anymore, not even close. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. This, she said, her voice steady as steel, is the email your gate supervisor, Derek Morrison, sent about me 2 days ago. I quote, "Another one trying to play pilot. Check her credentials extra carefully. You know how they get fake licenses online these days?" She paused, letting the words hang in the air like an accusation. By they, he meant black women. By another one, he meant the systematic discrimination your airline has perpetrated for the past decade. The chairman, William Ashford, loosened his tie with trembling fingers. "Captain Rhodes, surely we can discuss this." "We are discussing it," Amara interrupted, clicking to the next slide. "This is the security footage from Gate 23 showing your staff forcing me to wait outside in a thunderstorm while they verified credentials they'd already checked 3 times. That verification call, it went to no one. They made me wait 47 minutes in the rain as a power play." She clicked again. "And this is the most damning evidence of all. Your internal communication system, which I've had full access to for the past 2 days. Every racist email, every discriminatory policy hidden behind corporate speak, every complaint buried, every victim silenced, every crime covered up. How did you?" someone started to ask. "How did I get access?" Amara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's the beautiful irony. When Mr. Morrison finally let me in after his little power trip, he was so flustered he used his administrator credentials to log me into the system. He gave me the keys to your kingdom because he was too busy trying to humiliate me to follow basic security protocols. She clicked to the final slide, a simple graphic showing a countdown timer at 00:00. 45 minutes ago. Every piece of evidence I've collected was simultaneously released to the Department of Justice, the EEOC, CNN, the Washington Post, and 17 other major news outlets. Your stock price has already dropped 12% by market close. Meridian Airlines will be worthless. By this time next week, you'll be facing federal investigations, civil lawsuits, and criminal charges. The room erupted in panicked voices, but Amara was already walking toward the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the chaos she'd orchestrated. "You made me wait outside like I was nobody," she said quietly, her words somehow cutting through the noise. "Now the whole world is going to watch you burn from the inside. If you're watching this story unfold right now, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next in this extraordinary true story of discrimination, courage, and a woman who brought down an entire airline in 48 hours. 48 hours earlier, Captain Amara Rhodes had been flying for 15 years. She'd logged over 20,000 flight hours, earned commendations from 3 different airlines, and safely guided hundreds of thousands of passengers through everything from tropical storms to mechanical failures. She'd worked her way up from regional puddle jumpers to international wide bodies, earning her stripes through skill, dedication, and an unshakable love of aviation that had begun when she was 7 years old, watching planes take off from Detroit Metropolitan Airport. But none of that seemed to matter to Derek Morrison, the gate supervisor at Meridian Airlines' Chicago O'Hare hub, who was currently looking at her like she'd claimed to be an astronaut. "You're the pilot," he said, his voice dripping with skepticism that had nothing to do with her qualifications and everything to do with the color of her skin. "Captain Amara Rhodes," she confirmed, extending her credentials. "I'm deadheading to New York to pick up Flight 892 to London." Deadheading, flying as a passenger, to position for another flight was routine in the airline industry. Amara had done it hundreds of times, but never quite like this. Morrison took her credentials with the kind of exaggerated care usually reserved for handling suspicious packages. He studied her employee ID, her pilot's license, her passport, turning each document over as if expecting to find fake stamped on the back. "Wait here," he said finally, not returning her documents. "Is there a problem?" Amara kept her voice professional, though she could feel the familiar tightness in her chest, the one that came from navigating spaces where her competence was always questioned. Her presence always somehow surprising. "Just need to verify a few things." Morrison was already walking away, her credentials in his hand. Company policy. Amara watched him go, noting how he hadn't asked the same of Captain Brad Stevens, who'd checked in just ahead of her. Stevens, white and male and fitting every stereotype of what a pilot should look like, had been waved through with a smile and a "have a good flight, Captain." She checked her watch. 11:47 a.m. Her flight to New York departed at 12:30. Plenty of time, assuming Morrison didn't take too long with whatever verification he was pretending to conduct. The gate area was bustling with the usual pre-flight chaos. Business travelers typed furiously on laptops. Families quarreled restless children, and the overhead announcements created a constant backdrop of noise. Amara found a spot where she could see Morrison's desk, watching as he made a show of examining her documents under a magnifying glass he produced from somewhere. "Excuse me, are you the pilot?" Amara turned to find a young black girl, maybe 8 or 9, staring at her with wide eyes. The girl's mother stood behind her looking apologetic. "I'm sorry," the mother said. "She's just excited. She's never seen a pilot who looks like her." Amara finished gently smiling at the girl. "Yes, I'm a pilot, Captain Rhodes." "What's your name?" "Zara," the girl whispered, suddenly shy. "Nice to meet you, Zara. Are you flying somewhere special today?" "Disney World." Zara's shyness evaporated. "Mommy, look. She has the same uniform as the other pilots." "The exact same," Amara confirmed, kneeling to Zara's level. "Because I do the exact same job. We can fly any plane, go anywhere in the world. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." "Okay." Zara nodded solemnly, then broke into a grin. "Can I take a picture with you?" "Of course." As Zara's mother snapped a photo on her phone, Amara noticed Morrison returning. His expression had shifted from skeptical to something harder to read, frustrated, maybe that whatever he'd been looking for in her documents hadn't materialized. "Captain Rhodes," he said, emphasizing the title like it physically pained him, "I'm going to need you to step over here for additional screening." "Initial screening?" Amara straightened, her internal alarm bells ringing. "For what reason?" "Security protocols," Morrison said vaguely. "Won't take long." Amara glanced at her watch. 11:58. Still time, but her margin was shrinking. She thought about pushing back, demanding an explanation, but Zara was watching with those wide eyes. And the last thing Amara wanted was to create a scene that might scare the child or reinforce negative stereotypes. "Lead the way," she said instead, giving Zara one last smile. "Enjoy Disney World." Morrison led her not to the standard security checkpoint, but to a small office adjacent to the gate. Inside, 2 other Meridian employees waited, a younger man with a tablet and an older woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "We need to verify your credentials," the younger man said without preamble. "Mr. Morrison already verified them," Amara pointed out, "as did security when I entered the terminal and the check-in desk when I printed my boarding pass." "This is a different kind of verification," Morrison interjected. "We've had issues with fraudulent pilot credentials lately." Just being thorough. Fraudulent pilot credentials. Amara had been in enough similar situations to recognize coded language when she heard it. What Morrison really meant was, "I don't believe a black woman can be a pilot, so I'm going to make this as difficult as possible." "Fine," she said, maintaining her professional demeanor. "What do you need?" What followed was 20 minutes of questions that ranged from standard, "What type rating do you hold for the 777?" to invasive, "How exactly did you afford flight school?" to outright insulting, "Have you ever had any issues with other crew members not accepting your authority?" Amara answered each question calmly, precisely, even as her blood pressure rose. She thought of Zara probably boarding her flight to Disney World by now and reminded herself that every time she navigated these situations with grace, she made it a little easier for the next black woman pilot. By the time they finished their interrogation, it was 12:22. Her flight to New York was boarding. "Are we done here?" she asked. Morrison exchanged glances with his colleagues. "We need to make a call to verify." "To verify what?" Amara's patience finally frayed. You have my employee ID, you have my pilot's license, you have my passport. You've asked me technical questions that only a rated pilot could answer. What exactly are you trying to verify? Your attitude isn't helping, the older woman said primly. My attitude? Amara took a deep breath. Ma'am, I've been nothing but professional while you've subjected me to screening that you didn't require of any other pilot. My flight is boarding. Unless you have a legitimate reason to detain me further, we'll need you to wait outside while we make this call. Morrison interrupted. Amara stared at him. Outside, it's pouring rain. Company policy, he said, though Amara knew no such policy existed. Can't have non-verified personnel in secure areas. I am verified. I'm a Meridian Airlines captain with 15 years of experience. Outside, Morrison repeated, opening the door. Or I call security. The threat hung in the air. Amara knew how this would play out if security got involved. A black woman arguing with gate staff. Even with her credentials, even in her pilot's uniform, she'd be the one removed, probably in handcuffs. The story would be twisted. Disruptive passenger claiming to be pilot causes disturbance. Her career could be over before the truth came out. Thunder rumbled overhead as she stepped outside, rain immediately soaking through her uniform. Through the window, she could see Morrison on the phone, gesturing animatedly, but something was off. She'd been a pilot long enough to know what a verification call looked like. Quick, efficient by the book. This was theater. Her phone buzzed. A text from her first officer in New York. Where are you? We're supposed to prep for London in 30, she typed back. Delayed at OARD gate staff playing games again. This is the third time this month. File a complaint. The third time this month. But it wasn't just her. Amara was part of a group chat with other black pilots at Meridian. All 8 of them, out of nearly 5,000 pilots total. The stories were depressingly similar. Extra screening, credentials questioned, random drug tests that weren't random at all. Passengers assuming they were flight attendants. Gate agents assuming they were passengers and always having to prove they belonged in the cockpit. Her phone rang. Captain Patricia Williams, one of the few black female captains senior to Amara and something of a mentor. Heard you're stuck at O'Hare, Patricia said without preamble. Morrison, how did you know? He pulled the same with me last month, made me wait outside for an hour while he verified credentials he'd already verified 3 times. I filed a complaint. Know what happened? Nothing worse than nothing. I got a letter in my file about attitude problems and resistance to security protocols. They're building paper trails on us, Amara, pushing us out one humiliation at a time. Through the rain-streaked window, Amara watched Morrison hang up the phone and immediately start scrolling through his computer. Clearly not in any hurry. What do I do, Pat? What we always do, smile, comply, document everything, and wait for them to make a mistake. Patricia paused. They always make a mistake. These people aren't as smart as they think they are. After Patricia hung up, Amara stood in the rain, her uniform soaking through, and made a decision. She opened her phone's voice recorder and began narrating everything that had happened, creating a contemporaneous record. Then she switched to her camera, taking photos of Morrison through the window, clearly not on any call, just killing time while she stood in the storm. The rain intensified, driving sideways now. Her uniform was completely soaked, water running off the brim of her cap. Through the terminal windows, she could see passengers staring at her. A pilot standing in the rain like a punished child. Some took photos. Perfect, she thought bitterly. Tomorrow's viral post. Why was this pilot locked out? Finally, after 47 minutes, she timed it. Morrison opened the door. You can come in now, he said, not meeting her eyes. Your credentials check out. Of course they did. It checked out the first time and the second and the third. This had never been about verification. My flight to New York, she asked, though she already knew the answer. Departed 15 minutes ago, Morrison shrugged. You'll have to catch the next one. That's at, let me see, 4:30, 4 hours. Her London flight was supposed to depart at 300. There was no way she'd make it now. I need to call crew scheduling, Amara said. Phone's right there. Morrison pointed to a desk phone. You'll need to log into the computer to access the scheduling system. Here, I'll sign you in. He leaned over the keyboard, typing rapidly. Amara noticed he was using different credentials than the standard gate agent login, something with more access administrative level. Her eyes tracked his fingers. D. Morrison Admin 1 Meridian 2023. Sloppy. Very sloppy. As Morrison walked away, leaving her to sort out the mess he'd created, Amara sat at the computer and placed her call to crew scheduling. They were apologetic but unsurprised. Weather delays happened, they said carefully, not acknowledging that the only storm that had delayed her was the one in Derek Morrison's prejudiced mind. While she waited on hold, she glanced at the computer screen. Morrison had minimized the scheduling window but hadn't logged out. His administrative access was still active, and there in the taskbar was an icon she recognized. The Meridian Internal Communication System, the one that contained every email, every memo, every digital conversation in the company. She thought of Patricia's words, wait for them to make a mistake. Morrison had just made a big one. Amara glanced around. The office was empty. Morrison having returned to the gate to torment some other unsuspecting traveler. She had maybe 10 minutes before someone came back. 10 minutes to decide whether to play by the rules that were stacked against her or to finally fight back with the tools they'd accidentally handed her. She thought of Zara, the little girl with the wide eyes, heading to Disney World with dreams of being a pilot. She thought of every random screening, every question credential, every time she'd been asked if she was really a pilot. She thought of Patricia and the 7 other black pilots at Meridian, all fighting the same battles, all being slowly pushed out by a system designed to make them fail. Her fingers moved to the mouse. Click. The internal communication system opened like a flower, revealing years of emails, memos, and messages. Morrison's administrative access gave her visibility into everything, not just his communications, but the entire Chicago hub's management chain. She pulled out a USB drive from her flight bag when she used to back up navigation charts. Today, it would serve a different purpose. The first search she ran was simple, her own name. The results made her stomach turn, another diversity hire thinking she's special. Email from Morrison to his supervisor, dated 3 months ago. Make sure Rhodes gets the full screening if she comes through. Ord memo from hub management. We need to be careful with the black pilots. Document everything. Build a case. Email thread between HR and flight operations. The pattern was clear, systematic, and damning. But it went beyond just her. She searched for other pilots' names from their group chat. Each one had a file. Each one had been targeted. Her hands shook as she copied file after file. This wasn't just discrimination. It was conspiracy. A coordinated effort to push out pilots of color through 1,000 small cuts. Each one individually deniable, but collectively devastating. What are you doing? Amara's heart stopped. A young gate agent stood in the doorway, eyes wide. Amara started, then stopped. There was no innocent explanation for what she was doing. She was caught. The gate agent, her name tag read, stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. Are you downloading the discrimination files? Amara blinked. The what? We know about them, said quietly. The gate agents, the flight attendants, the ground crew, we all know. Morrison and his buddies think they're so clever, but we see everything. We've been waiting for someone with access to do something about it. Why haven't you? Because we don't have admin access. Because HR protects them. Because every time someone complains, they disappear. Transferred, fired, pushed out. Glanced at the door nervously. How much time do you need? I don't know. There's so much. Download everything. I'll keep watch. Moved to the door. Morrison's doing his power trip thing with another crew. You've got maybe 20 minutes. Why are you helping me? Smiled grimly. Because my girlfriend is a flight attendant. She's trans. You think Morrison only hates black pilots? Download it all, Captain. Burn it all down. As stood guard, Amara worked with the focused intensity she usually reserved for emergency procedures. She pulled email threads, downloading correspondence that painted a picture of systematic discrimination that went to the highest levels of Meridian Airlines. There were emails mocking Spanish-speaking employees, discussing ways to avoid hiring Muslims, lamenting the forced diversity of having to employ women. There were coordinated campaigns to push out older flight attendants, schemes to deny benefits to same-sex partners, and detailed strategies for making life miserable for any employee who didn't fit their narrow definition of normal. But the worst was a folder labeled Special Handling. Inside were profiles of employees marked for termination, not for performance issues, but for being too vocal about discrimination, for filing complaints, for refusing to stay quiet. Each profile included strategies for building false disciplinary records, creating hostile work environments, and forcing resignations. Patricia's name was in there, so were 17 others. "Morrison's coming back," Co hissed from the door, 30 seconds. Amara's USB drive was only 80% full, but it would have to do. She yanked it out, cleared the browser history, and had just managed to pull up the crew scheduling page when Morrison walked in. "Still here." He seemed surprised and annoyed in equal measure. "Still trying to fix the mess you created," Amara replied evenly. "I've missed my London flight. That's a full 777 that had to be delayed or cancelled because you felt the need to play games." "I was following security protocols," Morrison said, but something in her tone must have unsettled him because he added, "You can file a complaint if you feel you were treated unfairly." "Oh, I intend to do much more than file a complaint." Amara stood, pocketing the USB drive. "But first, I need to get to New York and explain to my chief pilot why a transatlantic flight was disrupted." She walked past Morrison, past Co, who gave her the slightest nod, and out into the terminal. Her uniform was still damp, her hair was a mess, and she just committed what was probably a fireable offense by accessing company files without authorization. But in her pocket was evidence that could change everything. The question was, what to do with it? As she walked to the gate for the 4:30 flight to New York, her phone buzzed. "Patricia again heard you missed your London flight." "You okay?" "I'm better than okay," Amara said. "Pat, we need to talk, all of us, the whole group tonight. What happened?" Morrison made a mistake. A big one. Amara glanced back at the office where she just committed either career suicide or the first blow in a revolution. "I have everything, Pat. Every email, every memo, every piece of evidence showing what they've been doing to us." Silence on the other end. Then, "Jesus Christ, Amara, are you serious?" "Dead serious. They've been building files on us." "Well, now I have files on them. The question is what we do with them. We call everyone tonight. My hotel room in New York." Patricia's voice had taken on the command tone that made her such a good captain. "And Amara, don't let that drive out of your sight. If what you have is what I think you have—" "I know," Amara said. "This changes everything." As she boarded the flight to New York in uniform, but as a passenger, thanks to Morrison's power play, Amara kept one hand on the USB drive in her pocket. Such a small thing, barely bigger than her thumb. But it contained evidence that could bring down an empire built on discrimination and hate. She thought again of Zara, the little girl with pilot dreams. By the time the child was old enough to earn her wings, Amara vowed the Derek Morrisons of the world would be gone, replaced by people who judged pilots by their skill, not their skin. The flight to New York took 2 hours. Amara spent them planning her next moves, knowing that once she shared what she'd found, there would be no going back. Her career at Meridian was likely over, win or lose. They'd find a way to push her out for this. But maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time to stop playing by rules designed to make her fail. Maybe it was time to flip the board entirely. By the time they landed at LaGuardia, Amara had made her decision. She wasn't just going to file a complaint or leak a few emails. She was going to systematically dismantle the entire structure that had tried to crush her and every other pilot who didn't fit their mold. Derek Morrison had made her wait outside in the rain, treating her like she didn't belong. Now she was going to show him and everyone like him exactly who they'd underestimated. The meeting in Patricia's hotel room that night would be the beginning of the end for Meridian Airlines as it currently existed. 8 pilots representing collectively over 100,000 hours of flight experience gathered around a laptop as Amara revealed what she'd found. "Holy shit," Captain Marcus Thompson whispered as they scrolled through email after email. "They really wrote all this down." "Arrogance," Patricia said grimly. "They thought they were untouchable. Thought we'd never fight back, or if we did, that the system would protect them. So what do we do?" asked Captain Kenji Nakamura, the youngest of their group. Take it to HR. HR is in on it, Amara pointed out, pulling up the relevant emails. Look, they're actively coordinating with Morrison and his team. They're not there to protect us, they're there to protect the company from us. The Union? Suggested Captain Maria Santos. Possibly, but look at this. Amira opened another folder. They've been working to keep us out of Union leadership positions. Every time one of us runs for a position, there's suddenly a scheduling conflict or a performance review. Media, said Captain James Wright firmly. We go public, all of it. If we do that, we're done at Meridian, Patricia warned. Whistleblowers don't survive in this industry, we'll be blackballed. We're already being pushed out, Amara countered. At least this way we go down fighting. Maybe we save the next generation. They debated for hours, weighing options, considering consequences. By 3:00 a.m., they'd reached a consensus. They would take a multi-pronged approach, file formal EOC complaints, reach out to journalists, contact civil rights attorneys, and yes, share everything with the union. Not the leadership that had failed them, but the rank and file who'd experienced similar discrimination. But Amara had one more card to play. Morrison's admin access is probably still active, she said. It's been less than 12 hours. It at Meridian is notoriously slow about updating credentials. You're not suggesting, Patricia started. I'm suggesting we find out exactly how deep this goes. We have evidence from Chicago. What about Atlanta, Dallas, Lowe's, Angels? What if this isn't just one hub? That would be illegal, yes, but so is systematic racial discrimination. So is conspiracy to deny employment based on race. So is retaliation against whistleblowers. Amara looked around the room at her fellow pilots. I'm not asking any of you to be involved. This is my risk to take. But if I can get in, if I can download evidence from the entire system. You could prove it's not just a few bad actors, Marcus said slowly. You could prove it's institutional. Exactly. Patricia stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, the lights of New York glittered, each one representing thousands of people going about their lives, trusting that the systems around them were fair, that merit mattered, that discrimination was a thing of the past. Do it, she said finally, but not from here, not from any of our devices. And for God's sake, be careful. If you're watching this story unfold, subscribe now to see how one pilot's courage exposed a conspiracy that went all the way to the top of one of America's major airlines. The next morning, Amara found herself in a cyber cafe in Queens, one of the few remaining places where you could still rent computer time anonymously. She'd paid cash, worn a baseball cap and sunglasses, and chosen a terminal in the back corner. It felt like something out of a spy movie, except the stakes were real careers, real lives, real justice. Morrison's credentials still worked. Meridian's IT department, in their corporate complacency, hadn't bothered to reset administrative access that was supposed to be temporary. Within minutes, Amara was inside the system. But this time, she wasn't limited to just Chicago. The scope of what she found dwarfed even her worst expectations. There was an entire hidden infrastructure dedicated to maintaining what they called traditional standards, a euphemism for keeping Meridian Airlines as white, male, and straight as possible. The system was sophisticated with coding mechanisms to flag employees by race, gender, sexual orientation, and religion. These flags were then used to track, monitor, and systematically disadvantage anyone who didn't fit their preferred profile. She found a point system that automatically downgraded performance reviews for minority employees. Algorithms that ensured diversity hires were assigned the worst routes, the oldest equipment, the most difficult schedules. Coordinated strategies to ensure minority pilots never achieved the seniority necessary for leadership positions. A secret fund used to pay settlements to keep discrimination victims quiet. Lists of employees marked for special attention, including all 8 black pilots in their group. But the most damning discovery was a series of emails from CEO Richard Whitman himself, dated just 6 months ago. The board is pushing this diversity nonsense, but we know how to handle it. Hire them if we must, but make sure they don't last. The cockpit is no place for social experiments. Maintain traditional standards at all costs. Amara's hands shook as she screenshot everything, uploaded files to multiple cloud services, and copied what she could to new USB drives she'd purchased that morning. She was building redundancy into her evidence collection. If they tried to destroy one copy, others would survive. 3 hours in, she hit the motherlode, a database tracking every discrimination complaint filed in the past decade, along with the company's response. Out of 847 complaints, exactly 0 had resulted in disciplinary action against the accused. Instead, 612 of the complainants had been terminated within a year of filing. The rest had been transferred, demoted, or had resigned under pressure. "They're not just discriminating," she murmured to herself. "They're systematically destroying anyone who speaks up about it." Her phone buzzed. Patricia, local news, just picked up a story about a pilot standing in the rain at O'Hare. Someone's video went viral. They're asking questions. Amara smiled grimly. The video of her standing in the rain, humiliated, soaking but still in uniform, had been shared thousands of times overnight. The optics were terrible for Meridian. A black female pilot locked out in a storm while white male pilots walked freely past. She had one more search to run. She typed in Derek Morrison's name, not looking for his discrimination files this time, but his personal communications. What she found made her stomach turn. Morrison wasn't just a racist gate supervisor. He was part of an organized group within Meridian called the Gatekeepers. Employees at various levels who saw themselves as protectors of the airline's traditional values. They had their own encrypted communications channel, their own strategies for identifying and eliminating undesirable employees, and they had a hit list. Patricia Williams was at the top, marked for immediate termination, fabricate safety violation if necessary. Amara Rhodes was number 3. Young, arrogant, think she's special. Make an example of her. The list went on, 87 names total, all minority employees who had shown excellence that threatened the narrative that only white men could be trusted with airplanes. She was so absorbed in documenting the gatekeepers' communications that she almost missed the email that changed everything. It was from Morrison to Whitman, dated yesterday, the day he'd humiliated her in the rain. Rhodes' situation handled. She accessed the system using my credentials. Intentional. We can claim she stole them. It confirms she downloaded files. We can prosecute for corporate espionage. Already have legal preparing charges. 2 birds, 1 stone. We get rid of her and send a message to the others. They'd set her up. The whole thing, the humiliation, the administrative access, even leaving her alone with the computer. It had all been a trap. They wanted her to access the system so they could prosecute her, destroy her credibility, and use her as an example to terrorize other minority employees into compliance. Except they'd made one crucial miscalculation. They'd assumed she'd only look at her own files, maybe download a few emails about herself. They never imagined she'd uncover their entire operation. Amara's mind raced. If they were preparing charges, she had maybe hours before police showed up at her door. She needed to act fast, but strategically. A data dump to media would be dismissed as the desperate act of a disgruntled employee facing criminal charges. She needed something more sophisticated. She pulled out her phone and made a call. "Samantha Chen, this is Captain Amara Rhodes. You interviewed me 2 years ago about diversity in aviation." "Yes, that's right. I have a story for you. The biggest aviation discrimination scandal in history, but I need your help and I need it now." Samantha Chen was an investigative journalist with the Washington Post who'd won a Pulitzer for exposing corruption in the defense industry. More importantly, she was smart, thorough, and had the resources to verify and disseminate information quickly. They arranged to meet at a diner in Brooklyn in 1 hour. Amara used the remaining time to organize her evidence, creating a clear narrative from the overwhelming amount of data she'd collected. She built timelines, cross-referenced communications, and highlighted the most damning evidence. As she prepared to leave the cybercafe, she made one last search, looking for any references to tomorrow's operations. What she found made her blood run cold, an email from Whitman to the board. Moving forward with Operation Clean Slate tomorrow, all problematic employees will receive termination notices simultaneously, coordinated across all hubs. By Friday, Meridian Airlines will be restored to its proper standards. Tomorrow, they were planning to fire every minority employee they could tomorrow, using whatever fabricated reasons they'd been building in their secret files. She screenshotted the email and ran for the door. There was no time to waste. The diner in Brooklyn was the kind of place that had seen everything and judged nothing. Samantha Chen was already there, sitting in a back booth with a laptop and what looked like recording equipment. "Captain Rhodes," she said as Amara slid into the opposite seat, "you sounded urgent on the phone because by tomorrow I'll either be in federal custody or every minority employee at Meridian Airlines will be unemployed." Amara pulled out the USB drives. "What I'm about to show you will destroy one of America's major airlines. Are you ready for that?" Samantha's eyes sharpened. "Show me." For the next 2 hours, Amara walked her through everything: systematic discrimination, the gatekeepers, the hit lists, Operation Clean Slate. Samantha's expression grew increasingly grim as she reviewed the evidence. This is massive," she said finally. "This goes beyond discrimination. This is organized crime, RICO violations, conspiracy, federal civil rights violations." She looked up at Amara. "You know what happens when this goes public? Meridian Airlines burns to the ground and you with it. They'll come after you with everything they have. Corporate espionage charges, theft of trade secrets, unauthorized access to computer systems. You could go to prison." "I know," Amara met her gaze steadily. "But tomorrow 87 people are going to lose their careers for the crime of being born the wrong color. How can I live with myself if I don't try to stop it?" Samantha nodded slowly. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I have a contact at the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. We're going to take this to them first tonight. Get ahead of any charges Meridian tries to file against you. Position you as a whistleblower, not a criminal. Will that work?" "It might, especially with this Operation Clean Slate email. Imminent harm to dozens of employees could justify your actions as necessary to prevent civil rights violations." Samantha was already typing on her phone. "My editor is standing by. We can have a story online within hours print edition tomorrow morning, but we need more than documents. We need human faces. Can you get any of the other pilots to go on record?" Amara thought of Patricia, Marcus, Maria, and the others. "Yes, they're ready to burn it all down. Good, because once this starts, there's no stopping it. Meridian will throw every lawyer, every PR firm, every dirty trick they have at us. You need to be prepared for your life to be turned inside out." "My life was turned inside out the day they decided I didn't deserve to be a pilot because of my skin color," Amara said. "At least now I'm fighting back." The next several hours were a blur of activity. Samantha's DOJ contact, Assistant Attorney General Janet Morrison, no relation to Derek, thankfully reviewed the evidence and immediately opened a federal investigation. She also provided something crucial, a letter stating that Amara Rhodes was cooperating with a federal civil rights investigation and any retaliation against her would be considered obstruction of justice. Meanwhile, Samantha worked with her team at the Post to verify key documents and prepare the story. Other pilots from Amara's group arrived throughout the evening, each adding their testimony to the growing mountain of evidence. "They made me take 6 drug tests in 3 months, Marcus Thompson told Samantha on camera. "Always random, my white co-pilot not tested once in 2 years. Every time I bid for a better route, there was suddenly a scheduling error." Maria Santos added, 15 years of scheduling errors. "I documented everyone. They assigned me a Czech pilot who'd posted on Facebook about keeping cockpits pure." Kenji Nakamura revealed, "When I reported it, I was told I was being too sensitive. The Czech pilot failed me on a maneuver I'd performed perfectly for a decade. As midnight approached, they had everything they needed. The story was ready. The DOJ was prepared to act, and every pilot in their group had gone on record." "One more thing," Samantha said as they prepared to publish. "That video of you standing in the rain. We're going to lead with that. Visual proof of how they treat black pilots, followed by the documentary evidence of why it's powerful." Amara nodded. What had been her humiliation would become Meridian's shame. At 12:01 a.m., the story went live. Systematic racism at 30,000 Althaftan. How Meridian Airlines built a secret system to purge minority pilots. By 12:15, it was trending on social media. By 12:30, other news outlets were picking it up. By 1000 a.m., Meridian's PR department was in crisis mode, issuing denials that only made them look worse as Samantha published supporting documents in real time. But the real fireworks started at 6,000 a.m. when FBI agents acting on the DOJ's overnight warrants raided Meridian's headquarters and all major hubs simultaneously. Operation Clean Slate, the mass firing of minority employees planned for that day, was stopped before it could begin. Instead, it was the conspirators who found themselves under arrest. Amara watched the news from her hotel room, surrounded by her fellow pilots. CNN was showing aerial footage of FBI agents carrying boxes out of Meridian's Chicago offices. Derek Morrison was visible, being led away in handcuffs. "We did it," Patricia said softly. "We actually did it." But Amara knew this was just the beginning. Meridian's stock price was in free fall. Calls for CEO Whitman's resignation were growing. The airline was facing federal prosecution, civil lawsuits, and a public relations nightmare that would take years to recover from, if it ever did. Her phone rang, an unknown number. "Captain Rhodes, this is Richard Whitman, the CEO himself." Amara put him on speaker so the others could hear. "Mr. Whitman, I'm surprised you're calling directly. I'm calling to offer you a deal. Return any remaining documents you have, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and we'll drop all potential charges against you. We'll even offer you a generous settlement. 7 figures, you'll never have to fly again." "Is that a bribe, Mr. Whitman? Because I'm fairly certain the FBI is recording this call." Silence. "Then you've destroyed a great American company. Thousands of people will lose their jobs because of your vendetta." "No, sir. You destroyed it the day you decided some people were worth less than others because of their skin color. I just exposed the rot. You'll never fly again. I'll make sure of it." "Maybe, but neither will you." Amara hung up. An hour later, Whitman resigned in disgrace as more evidence emerged of his personal involvement in the discrimination conspiracy. The board of directors, facing federal oversight and massive lawsuits, announced a complete restructuring of the company. By noon, Amara was back at LaGuardia Airport, this time not as a pilot, but as the face of a revolution. Reporters surrounded her as she made her way through the terminal. "Captain Rhodes, what's next for you? Are you planning to sue Meridian? Do you think this will change the industry?" She stopped, turning to face the cameras. Behind her, she could see gates full of passengers, many watching the scene unfold. How many of them had no idea their pilots faced discrimination? How many assumed merit was all that mattered in the cockpit? "What's next," she said clearly, "is accountability. For too long, airlines have hidden discrimination behind corporate policies and HR departments. That ends now. Every minority pilot who's been pushed out, every qualified candidate who's been rejected, every employee who's been humiliated and harassed, your voices will be heard." "But at what cost?" a reporter shouted. "Meridian stock has lost 60% of its value. Thousands of jobs are at risk. The cost of discrimination is always higher than the cost of justice," Amara replied. "Meridian made a choice to value bigotry over competence. Now they're paying the price." She walked away from the cameras through the terminal where just days ago Derek Morrison had tried to humiliate her. Now his desk stood empty, cordoned off with FBI tape. Patricia fell into step beside her. "So what are you going to do now for real?" "First, I'm going to sleep for about 3 days." Amara smiled wearily. "Then I'm going to make sure this never happens again. Not at Meridian, not at any airline. They're right, you know, we'll probably never fly for a major carrier again. Maybe, or maybe we start our own airline, one that judges pilots by their skills, not their skin." Patricia laughed. "You just brought down a billion-dollar company in 48 hours, and now you want to start an airline. Why not? If they won't let us fly for them, we'll fly for ourselves. Imagine it. An airline where diversity isn't a buzzword, but a reality where little girls like Zara can see pilots who look like them every single day." It was a crazy idea. Starting an airline required massive capital, regulatory approval, infrastructure. But then again, 48 hours ago, bringing down Meridian had seemed impossible too. Over the following weeks, as the investigation deepened and more arrests were made, something unexpected happened. Investors began reaching out to Amara and her group, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who'd faced their own discrimination, successful minority business owners who wanted to be part of changing aviation, even some institutional investors who saw opportunity in the wake of Meridian's collapse. "We could actually do this," Marcus said during one of their planning meetings. Start fresh. Build an airline from the ground up, with equality as a core value, not an afterthought. Phoenix Airlines, Maria suggested, rising from the ashes of discrimination. Horizon Air, Kenji countered, because we're looking forward, not back. They were still debating names when Amara's phone rang. It was Samantha Chen. Turn on CNN, she said. Now the breaking news banner read, Meridian Airlines files for bankruptcy. Largest discrimination settlement in U.S. history approved. The settlement was staggering, $2.3 billion to be divided among thousands of current and former employees who'd faced discrimination. The company that had seemed too big to fail had been brought to its knees by the weight of its own hatred. But there was more. As part of the bankruptcy proceedings, Meridian's assets would be sold off. Gates, routes, even aircraft would be available to qualified buyers. We need to make a bid, Patricia said immediately. This is our chance. We can buy the pieces we need to build something better. It would take everything they had and more. But as Amara looked around the room at pilots who'd been told they didn't belong, who'd been humiliated and harassed and nearly broken by a system designed to exclude them, she saw not victims but founders. Not just pilots, but pioneers. Let's do it, she said. Let's show them what we can build when we're not waiting outside in the rain. 6 months later, at a press conference announcing the launch of Soar Airlines, they'd finally agreed on a name. Amara stood before a crowd of reporters, investors, and future employees. Behind her was their first aircraft, a Boeing 737 purchased from Meridian's liquidation, repainted in livery that featured every color of the rainbow. When I stood outside in the rain at O'Hare, she began, I never imagined it would lead to this. But discrimination has a way of creating its own destruction. When you tell people they don't belong, when you waste their talents on hatred, when you build systems to exclude rather than include, you don't just hurt individuals, you weaken your entire organization. She looked out at the crowd, finding familiar faces. There was Ko, the gate agent who'd helped her that day, now their head of ground operations. There was Samantha Chen, documenting this next chapter. There were her fellow pilots, all in their new Soar Airlines uniforms. Meridian Airlines thought they could shut us out. Instead, they shut themselves down. Today we launch something new, an airline where your ability to fly matters more than your ability to fit in. Where diversity isn't a quota, but a strength. Where no qualified pilot will ever be told to wait outside. The crowd erupted in applause. Behind them, their first flight Soar 1 from New York to Chicago was boarding. Captain Patricia Williams would be in command with Captain Marcus Thompson as her first officer. It was a crew that Meridian would never have allowed, and that was exactly the point. As Amara watched passengers board, a notably diverse group who'd chosen to fly with them specifically because of what they represented, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Zara, the little girl from the airport. My mum showed me the news. You started your own airline. I'm definitely going to be a pilot now. Thank you for showing me it's possible. Amara smiled, typing back. Can't wait to fly with you someday, Captain Zara. Derek Morrison was serving 3 years in federal prison for civil rights violations. Richard Whitman was facing even longer. Meridian Airlines existed not only in business school case studies as an example of how discrimination could destroy even the most established companies, but from its ashes, something new had grown. Not just an airline, but a movement. Other industries were examining their own practices, their own traditional standards. The pilots who'd been told they didn't belong were now setting the standards for others to follow. As Sorwan pushed back from the gate, Amara stood watching from the terminal. She thought about that day in the rain, how small and powerless she'd felt, how wrong they'd been about her, how wrong they'd been about all of them. Her phone rang, another reporter, another interview request. Story of Meridian's fall and Soar's rise had captured the public imagination. David versus Goliath, if David had been a black female pilot and Goliath had been institutional racism. Captain Rhodes, one question, the reporter said when she answered, do you have any regrets about how things went down? Meridian employed thousands of innocent people who lost their jobs. Amara considered the question. It was one she'd asked herself many times. I regret that it was necessary, she said finally. I regret that Meridian chose discrimination over decency. I regret that it took destroying a company to create change, but I don't regret fighting back. When systems are built on injustice, sometimes the only solution is to tear them down and build something better. And is saw Airlines that something better. We're trying to be every day. We're trying. That's all anyone can do. Try to be better than what came before. She ended the call and headed to her own gate. SAW 2 to Atlanta was departing in an hour, and Captain Amara Rhodes was in command. Her first officer was a young woman named Destiny, fresh from flight school, full of dreams that no one would tell her were impossible because of her skin color. As she performed her pre-flight checks, Amara thought about circles and cycles, about how humiliation could become triumph, how discrimination could spark revolution. Derek Morrison had made her wait outside to prove she didn't belong. In response, she'd built a place where everyone belonged. The control tower crackled to life. SAW 2, you're cleared for takeoff. SAW 2, cleared for takeoff, Amara responded, pushing the throttles forward. As the aircraft lifted into the sky, carrying passengers who'd chosen to fly with an airline that valued diversity over division, Amara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Not vindication. That was too small a word for what she felt. This was transformation. This was justice. This was what happened when you pushed people too far. They didn't break. They built. Down below, the city fell away, but the movement continued. Other airlines were changing their policies, desperate to avoid Meridian's fate. Flight schools were actively recruiting minority candidates. Little girls like Zara were making plans to reach for the sky, all because one pilot had refused to accept that waiting outside in the rain was just the way things were. All because when they tried to lock her out, she'd found a way to lock them down instead. "Beautiful takeoff, Captain," Destiny said from the right seat. "Thank you," Amara replied, settling in for the flight. "You know, a year ago, someone told me I'd never fly again." "What did you say?" Amara smiled, remembering Whitman's threat, how certain he'd been of his power. "I told him neither would he. Turns out I was right." They flew on through clear skies, two women in a cockpit that some had said they'd never deserve, proving with every mile that merit had nothing to do with melanin, that competence couldn't be measured by conformity. Behind them, more SAW flights were taking off. Ahead of them, a future where discriminate,